All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're taking you inside the room for a meeting that would really define global politics for the next 2 decades. We're talking about the very first summit between U.S. President George W. Bush and Russian President Vladimir Putin. What was said behind those closed doors? Well, it set the stage for pretty much everything that followed.
Okay, so let's start with the line that basically set the tone for the entire encounter. Before they even got into the nitty-gritty, Putin puts this on the table. This was his one non-negotiable condition: respect. This wasn't just some casual remark, it was a clear declaration. Russia was not the humbled nation of the 1990s anymore. It was a demand to be seen, to be treated as a major power on the world stage once again.
And the stakes here? They couldn't have been higher. This meeting in Slovenia back in June of 2001, this was no simple photo op. Think of it as the opening move in a really complex geopolitical chess match. You have two relatively new leaders, both trying to figure the other one out, both trying to define the future of the U.S.-Russia relationship.
So let's look at the two men actually sitting at the table. On one side, you have George W. Bush, 54 years old. His whole goal was to cut through all the diplomatic jargon and build a real personal relationship. And then on the other side, you have Vladimir Putin, 48, a former intelligence officer. His singular focus? Restoring Russia's status as an equal. You can see right away, these aren't just different goals, they're fundamentally different ways of looking at the world.
So, this brings us right to the first major point of conflict. The conversation didn't waste any time with pleasantries. It dove straight into their biggest disagreements. We're talking about the future of European security, the expansion of NATO, and America's plans for a missile defense system.
And this is where you can just see their two worldviews colliding. From the American point of view, Bush is saying, look, NATO is just a club for democracies. If you're a peaceful country, why would you feel threatened? But Putin saw a military alliance creeping closer and closer to his borders. Then you have missile defense. Bush saw it as a necessary shield against new threats, while Putin saw it as tearing up a treaty that had kept the peace for decades.
Now, to really get why Putin was so deeply concerned here, we have to understand what this treaty was. The ABM Treaty. I mean, this was the bedrock of Cold War stability for almost 30 years. The logic was actually pretty simple. If neither side could defend against a nuclear attack, then neither side would be crazy enough to start one. So for Putin, walking away from this wasn't just a policy tweak. It was like upending the entire strategic chessboard.
And Putin's response to this was just brutally simple. He didn't frame it as some kind of diplomatic negotiation. Nope. He framed it like a law of physics. If you build a shield, we will build more swords. It's just simple arithmetic. It was a stark warning, basically telling Bush that abandoning the treaty would, without a doubt, ignite a brand new arms race.
So they're facing this clear stalemate on security issues, right? President Bush makes a really clever strategic pivot. He sees that the conversation is completely deadlocked, so he decides to change the subject, shifting the whole focus away from military hardware and toward economic partnership.
Bush lays out this comprehensive package. It wasn't just one thing. He offers to be totally transparent about the shield. He suggests they cut their swords together. And then, and this is the big one, he adds a major economic sweetener, full-throated American support for Russia to join the World Trade Organization.
And you know what? This strategic shift worked, like instantly. The source material shows this was the first moment in the meeting where Putin's whole demeanor changed. All this talk of economic integration, of Russia having a seat at the global economic table, it was a powerful lure. It offered a vision for Russia's future that wasn't just about military competition. It was a real opening. So, seeing this little shift in the atmosphere, Bush decides to take a huge risk. A really huge risk. He moves the conversation away from policy entirely and makes this deeply personal, completely unscripted move. This was not in any of his briefing books, you can be sure of that.
You have to just imagine the scene, right? In this world of carefully crafted talking points and diplomatic speak, the President of the United States is about to go completely off script. The sources say his advisors, people like Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice, were literally holding their breath. Nobody had any idea how the famously guarded Russian leader would react to this.
And there it is, the famous, and later, highly controversial line. Bush isn't talking about treaties or policy anymore. He's making a direct appeal, man to man. He's trying to build a foundation of personal trust that he hopes can get them past their huge political disagreements. It was a classic Bush move, all instinct and deeply personal.
The tension in that room must have been just incredible. After this deeply personal declaration, Putin just sits there, silent, for what must have felt like an eternity. Everyone just waited. Was he offended? Was he calculating a response? This was the moment the entire meeting was hanging on.
And then his response. So quiet, so measured, but so clear. With just those 6 words, Putin accepts the personal gesture. He doesn't get all emotional back, but he acknowledges it. He agrees to it as a foundation. He's signaling that, despite all their massive disagreements, a path forward, built on this personal connection, might just be possible.
So what was the actual result of this absolute roller coaster of a meeting? Where did these two world leaders actually land at the end of their first ever encounter?
Well, the takeaways are this really interesting mix of hope and hard reality. On one hand, yeah, there was a genuine sense of personal optimism, a feeling that these two guys could actually work together. But on the other hand, none of the big issues, not NATO, not missile defense, none of it was actually solved. What they really established was a new framework, two major powers talking candidly, with a very fragile path forward built on the personal rapport they'd just created. And that leaves us with the big question that really hangs over this entire meeting, doesn't it? This first impression created a genuine moment of opportunity, a path toward a totally different kind of US-Russia relationship. So the crucial question history forces us to ask is, why, over the next 2 decades, would that path prove so incredibly difficult to follow?